Today, I'm going to test the driver assist systems in this Renault 4, but this will be a slightly different video than usual. That's because the press car I've borrowed this week, well, it's missing the package called Advanced Driver Assist. And if you've seen my review of the Renault 5, you might have also noticed that if you want the car to steer for you and adapt its speed to the speed limits and the road ahead, well, you have to buy this add-on package, the Advanced Driver Assist. It comes in two versions, for either 5,000 or 7,200 Danish kroner, where the more expensive version also includes automatic parking assist. I don't have that in this car either. In fact, I have neither of those features. So, the car can't steer for me, and it can't adapt its speed to the speed limits and the road ahead, which is what I usually test. That was a bit of a setback, but on the other hand, I have tested it in the Renault 5, and I assume it works more or less the same as it does in this one. So I thought it would be fun to make a video where I run through the same tests, but point out what you don't get, unless you spend that minimum of 5,000 extra for the Advanced Driver Assist. So that's what you'll be seeing in this video. At the end of the video, I'll also give my overall assessment of the car, so be sure to watch all the way through. Before we head out, I usually turn off these driver monitoring alarms because they can be quite annoying, chiming and beeping as you drive. And the reason I do that is because the speed warning sometimes pops up even when it's not necessary. The car thinks the speed limit is different from what it actually is, and then I get an alarm even though I'm driving at the legal speed. Luckily, it's actually quite easy and straightforward to manage this particular setting in the Renault 4, whether you want the alarms to be turned on or off, because in the menu, under the car icon, I have my driver assists available. And here I have a safety setting called All On. That's all the safety alarms, and they're on by default every time you get in and start the car. That's required by law. But you also have something called Perso here, for personal, and then you can go into Configure My Safety Perso. In here, I can choose exactly what should be turned on and what should be turned off. I only have to do this once, and then I can select the exact combination of settings that I want. And every time I go for a drive, I have to apply these settings in the car. But I have a physical button for that right here on the left. I just have to press it twice. And my safety personal is selected. Then all the settings for the alarms, both on and off and whatever I prefer, are set just by pressing a physical button twice. I definitely think that's the best possible solution. It's much faster than having to swipe down on a touchscreen and turn things on and off or find a setting in a menu. Just 2 presses on this physical button and we're ready to drive. So let's get going. I'm on the motorway now, and to activate the adaptive cruise control, I just press this button right here, and that sets it to the speed I'm allowed to drive on this stretch of road. If I had this Advanced Driver Assist package installed, well, it would have also activated lane centering, meaning auto steering in the car, but of course it doesn't do that here. To adjust my speed, I use this stalk like on all other cars, and a single press increases it by 1 km/h, and if I hold it down, it increases it by 10 km/h. To adjust the distance to the car in front, I use the button here in the middle, and there I can choose between 4, 3, 2, or 1 car lengths. If you choose the Advanced Driver Assist package so that the car can steer for you, it also needs to know whether your hands are on the steering wheel. Fortunately, Renault has chosen the right solution with a touch sensor, so you don't have to apply any resistance. You just have to put your hand on the wheel and the car can feel it. It's a super good solution, and it works really, really well. We will also see how the car handles overtaking on adaptive cruise control. If I am behind a slow-moving car and indicate that I want to overtake by activating the turn signal, what does the car do? Over here on the power meter, you can see how much it steps on the accelerator when I activate the turn signal, and see if it steps enough for me to get up to speed quickly in the overtaking lane. So let's give it a try right now. I have activated the turn signal, and I can see the car is starting to accelerate. And now I pull out and I'm free of the car in front, and it continues to accelerate out here, so now I'm up to 110, the speed I'm allowed to drive here. So it works perfectly as it should. That's great. Something I also always test is what the adaptive cruise control does if I'm in the overtaking lane at 110, and then I need to pull into the inside lane behind a slower moving vehicle. How does it handle that? Are any alarms triggered because I get to close? Or how does the assistance behave? Let's give it a try. As you can see, it brakes just fine. That was also my experience in the Renault 5 and in my own Renault Megane. It works quite well with Renault systems. Something I also always test on the motorway is how the car handles wide and narrow lanes. For example, during roadworks, where the lane is narrower than normal, and at motorway entrances, where it is wider than normal. And for good reason, I can't test that either, because it doesn't work if you don't have advanced driver assist. But I tested it in a Renault 5, and the conclusion is that narrow lanes down to 2 meters, it simply can't handle that. It won't steer for you there. It handles wide lanes just fine, and so do almost all electric cars today. This car doesn't have blind spot assist either, because that's also part of this advanced driver assist package. So if you buy it, you also get blind spot assist. As far as I remember, it is not shown down in the display, but it is shown out in the side mirror. If you want to see how it works, you can watch my video about the driver assistance in the Renault 5. I'll link to it at the end of this video. I also always test how quickly the cars are able to detect the lane markings, that is, reacquire the lane, when I change lanes. And I do this by activating the turn signal, because it temporarily turns off the function that monitors the lane markings. And I can also do that in this car, even though it doesn't have lane centering assist, because it still has lane assist, where it keeps an eye on the lane markings on the road and then warns me if I'm about to cross into another lane. And you can see it down here in the display. There are white stripes on each side of the lane here, and that's because the car can see that the markings are there. So when I activate the turn signal, you can see that they turn gray down here, and that means that now it can't see the lane markings. And now that I've entered the new lane, I'm deactivating the turn signal, and there it found the lane again. It took a short second or something like that. It's about the same as what I saw on the Renault 5, and it's okay. It is around average. I've seen cars that are faster, but I've also seen cars that are slower. Now I'm on the open highway, and this is where I usually test how the auto steering handles roads like this, uphill, where it can't see the lane markings far ahead. But for good reasons, I can't test that in this car, because it doesn't have lane centering assist auto steering. I also can't test whether it automatically changes the speed to the speed limits, because it doesn't, but I can at least see how good it is at detecting the speed limits, and then I can manually change the speed on the adaptive cruise control by pressing this button down here, as we saw just before. So let's start the test on the upcoming speed limit change. Here comes the 60-kilometer zone, so the car should register that I can drive 80. And it did, and if I then press the button, well, the adaptive cruise control also accelerates up to 80, so it works okay. I mean, it works just like in the other cars I've tested, where the car can't adjust the speed itself, but where I have to manually confirm. So that's all you can do if you don't have this advanced driver assist package. The car can still detect the speed limit, but I need to manually confirm whether I want to change the speed. And now we come to a city zone up ahead, and if I had advanced driver assist, the car would already start to slow down, so that I'm driving 50 kilometers per hour when I reach the city zone. But you can see I'm not doing that here. I'm driving 80, so I need to manually push the confirm button before the car starts to decelerate, which means I have way too high a speed going into the city zone. And that's the disadvantage when the car doesn't adjust the speed in advance. Now we've come to the part of my test route where the speed limits change from first 50 kilometers per hour in the city zone and then to 60, 70 and 80 on the highway. And this is where I usually test how good the car is at changing speed automatically. The Renault 4 won't do that without this package, but I'm planning to test something else instead, because the cars that I've tested that can't adjust the speed themselves, they usually use this little stalk over here where you set the speed up and down to kind of approve the new speed limit. The Renault 4 doesn't do that. It has its own button up here, and what I'd like to see is what happens if I don't confirm the new speed right away. As you can see, it puts a white square around the allowed speed, because I'm allowed to drive 60, but then the white square disappears. And in the other cars, that means that if I press the button that's supposed to confirm the speed, nothing happens, because then I just adjust the speed up and down. But let's try to see what happens in the Renault 4. When I pressed the button, a green square appeared around the speed sign down there, and it changed the speed to 60. That's actually better than in other cars that can't adjust the speed by themselves, but where you have to manually confirm the new speed using the speed adjustment stalk over here. Because if you wait too long in those cars, you've missed the chance to adjust the speed to the new limit. But that doesn't happen in the Renault 4, even if you don't have this extra advanced driver assist package. I can set the speed to the limit shown on the display at any time. So even though I've been driving for a while now, and I'm actually allowed to drive 70, now I'm entering an 80 zone, it has registered that too. Let's just wait for the white square to disappear. In other cars, it would now be too late to adjust the speed, but here I can still press it, and then it says, okay, you want to drive what we're allowed to here, so we'll drive 80. In that respect, it's a little bit better than the other cars that can't adjust the speed themselves, but where you have to confirm manually. I have the option to confirm, and I don't have to do it right after the sign. I can do it at any time. Down here, there's a roundabout, and if I had the advanced driver assist package installed, the car would start to slow down even more as I approach the roundabout. So that I enter the roundabout at 30 kilometers per hour and can drive around it without using either the accelerator or the brake. Now there were cars here, so I had to brake, but as you might have seen, the Renault 4 didn't slow down at all. And that's of course because I don't have the advanced driver assist package installed in this car. As you can see here, the adaptive cruise control also works down to 0 kilometers per hour. And if it doesn't take too long before the car in front starts moving, well, it starts up again and drives on automatically. I've tested it works even after 10 seconds. Something I also always test is what happens if you drive with all assistance systems on, that is auto steering and adaptive cruise control, and then let go of the steering wheel, maybe because you've had a medical emergency. The Renault 4 here, well, it doesn't know that I don't have my hands on the steering wheel because it doesn't have touch sensors in the steering wheel when I don't have the advanced driver assist package. It doesn't register whether I have my hands on the wheel, but it can see the lane markings out there, so if I'm about to drive over the markings, it gives me a message, and it also pushes me back into the lane. But when it's back in the lane, it stops beeping, and then it just keeps driving. I was a little close there, I think. But you can see again, yes, it says maintain control, but it doesn't see if I take control. It just sees that I'm back in the lane, and if I go to the other side, it will do the same and push me back into the lane. But it keeps driving. It doesn't stop. So if I had gotten sick, fainted, had a heart attack, whatever, the car would just keep driving and it would keep bouncing like a bowling ball between the lane markings. So that's the disadvantage when you don't have the advanced driver assist package, if you're driving with adaptive cruise control. If you have the package, the car does exactly what it's supposed to do, and you can see that in the video about the Renault 5. It tries by all possible means to make me aware that I have to grab the steering wheel, and if I don't, it turns on the hazard lights and brings the vehicle to a complete stop. So if you have the advanced driver assist package installed, the car is among the best in handling such emergencies. I also always test the cars on this road, where I have a grass verge on one side and only lane markings in the middle, and the Renault 5 handled that quite well. It wasn't among the best, but it wasn't among the worst either. And now we're on the last part of my test route. This little road where you can only drive 40, but where there are fine markings. And I use it to test how the auto steering can handle roads that wind a bit more than usual. For good reason, I can't test that today, but I'm including it because when I tested it in the Renault 5, I couldn't get the car to steer for me either. But that was my fault. Because the auto steering in the Renaults can only be activated when the car is going over 60 kilometers per hour. It actually works if you go below 60 kilometers per hour. Once you've activated it and the speed limit drops to 40, the car will still steer as long as it can see the lane. But you can't activate it unless you're driving more than 60, and I can't do that on this stretch because you're only allowed to drive 40, so that's why I couldn't get the Renault 5 to steer for me here at all. So it was probably better than it seemed. Well, this turned out to be a slightly different video than the ones I usually make about driver assistance. But hopefully it was also useful for deciding whether you want to pay extra for the advanced driver assist package. Personally, I would definitely pay the extra $5,000 that the cheapest package costs. I don't need parking assistance, but it's really nice when the car can help with steering and automatically adapt the speed to the speed limits and the course of the road. And as you've seen, it's also safer if you, as the driver, were to have a medical emergency. I just think it's a shame that it costs extra, because in my opinion, it really should be included in the price. And the price, well, that's actually very close to Renault's next model, the Megane. If you buy a Techno model with the Assist package, it costs, at the time I'm recording this video, around 253,000 Danish kroner. A similar model in the Renault 4 costs only 8,000 kroner less. In the Megane, you get a much larger screen for the infotainment systems and, not least, about 10% longer range, which can actually mean the difference between whether you can drive across the country without charging or not, depending on how far you need to go. You get a trunk that is 20 litres larger, but on the other hand, it's without the Renault 4's flat-loading lip and the ability to transport items up to 2 meters and 20 in length. And if you fold the seats down, the Renault 4 actually has 70 litres more total storage space than the Megane. What you should choose, therefore, depends on your needs. So if you, for example, often need to transport a stroller or something similar, the 4 is clearly more practical. But if you often need some extra range, then I think it's definitely also worth taking a look at the Megane. Regarding the software in both cars, it's among the best you can get, both when it comes to the voice assistant and route planning, as well as the ability to install third-party software. But on the other hand, it doesn't seem like Renault is very good at updating it with new features. The assistance systems are fine, but no longer on par with the best. They work for the most part, as they should, but in my opinion, the auto steering could be a bit better at registering the lane. If you want to see how they work in practice, when you've paid for the upgrade to Advanced Driver Assist, just click on this video. And if you want to support the channel directly, I'm always happy for a cup of coffee. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, I hope you feel like doing that now. See you soon.